have you join us today for Mindset's webinar on remote design thinking. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, today's presenter is Mindset Solution Owner and UX Design Expert, Dan Flesher. Dan is an experienced SAP UX architect and a design thinker. He began his SAP career as an ABAP developer and transitioned to a focus on SAP UI5 and Gateway Data Service Department. In addition to his development background, Dan has a passion for digital transformation and design thinking and for helping clients with their trickiest challenges. Dan is a frequent speaker for ASUG, TechEd, and at SAP UX events. He's also a contributor to the SAP UX newsletter and the Mindset blog. He's put together a fantastic presentation to share with you today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Dan.
Thank you, Amy. So as Amy mentioned, and hopefully what everyone is here for, is today's webinar on how to run remote design workshops. It's something that's particularly relevant with everything going on with COVID-19 and a lot of people new to working from home, and understanding how can we take this process that we normally run through in-person workshops with design thinking and transition to remote delivery while still managing to deliver the same experience, to engage our end users, and to ultimately deliver quality solutions and applications. So our mission at Mindset is we are committed to making the technology experience significantly better at work. And one of the ways that we have always delivered on that is by taking a design-led development approach and starting all of our projects with a design thinking workshop or some sort of design sprint to really make sure that we understand the challenges that our users face and are able to build something meaningful and valuable for them. So today's agenda, just a quick design thinking overview. For those of you that have engaged with us before, this might be some recap material. And for those of us joining us for the first time, maybe this is something new. I'd like to level set on how we take a look at the design thinking process. And then we'll jump into some specifics around what it's like to run these sessions remotely. So we'll cover some logistics and best practices. We'll take a look at what a sample agenda for a workshop might look like. We'll go over some of the tools that we would use to deliver those workshops, and then we'll go over any final takeaways. We'll have some time for Q&A, and certainly we'll provide our contact information. Today is meant to be an overview, but it won't necessarily be a deep dive into some of the tools, but we're always happy to share more information and answer any questions you might have, either at the end of the session or if you'd like to reach out. So like I said, first we're going to start with a quick overview on what is design thinking. So the way we'd really summarize it, or I kind of think about it, is design thinking is first and foremost a user-centered process where we first look to gain a common understanding of our users, their processes, their day-to-day life, and what it's like for them to do whatever tasks it is they're working on. And then we take that empathy we've built, we take those processes and people that we've defined our challenges for, and we come up with our new solutions. And then we test that with our users, and ultimately we look for ways to make sure that we get that implemented. So user-centered approach to first defining a problem and then defining solutions that'll provide real value. So some of the deliverables that come out of our workshops, whether they are in person or delivered remotely, include documented insights from users, business, and IT. So this is any of our user research that we conduct, any surveys, any photographs, any personas and process maps that we might create. We keep all this documentation available to help either refer back to for the design thinking team, or to share amongst our team members to get them caught up on what we did and kind of the process of how we got to our final solutions. This also includes low res and high resolution prototypes. So the low resolution, typically pen and paper or marker and whiteboard, initial sketches of the solution. And then we move into creating high fidelity prototypes in tools like Sketch, and that we add interactivity to with InVision. This helps us really align on the solution that we're going to create, both for our users to say, hey, we really think this is going to work for us. And it serves as a really good initial artifact for our development team to work off of when they're looking to actually create that interface. In the spirit of making sure that we transition from design into actual development and implementation, we also create an initial backlog of user stories that represent the app that we want to build. So Mindset typically uses agile build processes, and so we create these user story backlogs to really align on, what features we're going to deliver, what time frame we're going to deliver them in, and an overall estimation for the project. So really, out of this design thinking project, workshop, it sets up the way that we can actually implement all these new great tools that we design as part of the workshop. So just a little bit more information on each phase. The first phase is inspiration. And this is typically, you can think of it as a user research phase. This lasts anywhere from 1 day to 1 week, depending on how much time we're able to get with our users and how complex the business process is that we need to understand. The purpose of this phase is to make sure that we are engaging our user base to understand exactly what it's like to do their job and to kind of live a day in their shoes. Outputs of this include things like process maps, observation notes, and personas. And again, what we're really looking to come out of this phase with is an understanding of who we're designing for, what their specific challenges are, and all of that will serve as a good base to make sure that our solutions are pointed specifically at their needs and not something that we're kind of designing in a vacuum. This is just an example of the persona artifacts that we create as part of our workshops. Again, they're a nice succinct way of summarizing some of the user research that we conduct and the observations that we do, and really puts into perspective, some quotes like what they're actually saying when we engage them, the devices they use, so we know what tools they have on hand that they're using today, and maybe how that might inform future solutions. Context gives us a good amount of information about the environment in which they work. So some users, typical office setting in their cubicle at a desk. Other users we've worked with are miles underground in a salt mine or on a factory floor wearing protective equipment. And all of that serves to inform the solution and understanding what, how they're going to want to interact with that and what devices might be best. And then certainly we have goals and pain points. So this is where we try and look at what the user is trying to do, how they measure success, how they feel about their performance, and the pride they take in their work. And then we also want to look at pain points. So what's actually holding them back from reaching those goals? What are these friction points that we would want to solve for in their new solution? So we can at least remove some of these barriers that's maybe not allowing them to reach those goals as efficiently or quickly as they would like to. So even when we move into the next phase, we want to have these personas readily available for people to refer to, so that as you're thinking up new solutions, you're actually tying it back to our end users. So that leads us right into the ideation phase. As the name kind of suggests, this is where we're going to come up with a bunch of new ideas. We're going to take those defined processes, we're going to take those real user pain points and goals and context, and use that to come up with ideas for our new solutions. Sample outputs of this include Crazy 8 sketches and low-res prototypes. Crazy 8s, if it's a tool you've never used before, is just a way that we kind of encourage people to brainstorm one sheet of paper, fold it a couple ways, and brainstorm 8 features and functions for new solutions. And then we take the low-res prototypes and wrap up all those good ideas that people have come up with into kind of a full solution with an end-to-end flow that'll meet our process. For remote sessions, we typically still rely on pen and paper over digital sketching. And this tends to be more of a function of what tools people have available than maybe what the ideal state would be. Some of the tools we'll talk about later today support remote sketching very well. They have iPad apps and apps for Windows 10 touch devices, and it can be really effective if everyone has an iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil, or really nice touchpads to be able to sketch with. But we haven't found that typically to be the case, or something that you can really assume is available. So the pen and paper is something that's still very accessible. We can have users take pictures and upload them, and they'll still be able to kind of walk through the solutions that they've created. And then implementation. So this is the phase where we really like to, have people understand that the reason we do this is so that we can set up the successful build of these tools. So design thinking is sort of a different approach to traditional requirements gathering. It's a way that we can engage users collaboratively. It's a way that we can use things like sketching and other visual tools to gather these requirements. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is make sure that we're coming up with valuable solutions for our users, and that we're understanding the effort that it would take to implement those. So this is where we're going to show our high resolution prototype in InVision. We'll take comments and feedback and continue to refine that prototype before we get to development. So again, making sure that users and all the stakeholders are comfortable with what we want to deliver, and we can pretty well agree that it will solve those challenges that we've identified. And then the other piece that we've kind of mentioned is the user story backlog. So again, for agile development practices, we want to take those prototypes, we want to break that out into individual user stories that spell out the features and functions that this app will deliver on. And that's a really great artifact for our developers to then go in and estimate how long they think each is going to take, add development tasks, testing criteria, and really build out that plan that says, this is how long it's going to take to deliver this effort, feature by feature, and really set us up in a place where you can transition from that design phase right into implementing these solutions that we know are going to be valuable to our users. And here's just an example of some outputs that come from InVision. So again, it's meant to look like the application that people are actually going to get. They can click through and understand the flow of things, and they can also leave comments, which are really important. So even after the session, we're not done collecting feedback. We're going to still go out to our users, build that feedback into the prototyping tool, understand how they feel about things, continue to refine, and even continue to engage them through development. So now that we've kind of covered the baseline on what our design thinking process looks like and some of the deliverables that we aim to achieve, now we want to start looking at really how does this apply when we want to run these remote workshops with distributed teams. And I think a good place to start with that is taking a look at some of the logistics that might be a little bit different. So here we look to identify our core participants. So first and foremost, we have our end users. We always want to actively engage the people we're actually designing for. And we typically do that not only through the research phase, but also give them the chance to participate in the sessions, brainstorm their own solutions, and really give them a sense of ownership of the tool. A lot of groups we've worked with in the past, their user base kind of feels like tools are sprung on them, and that they don't have a lot of say in this. And by bringing the users into this conversation, it really gives them a chance to have their opinions heard, feel like their voice matters, and kind of co-create that next solution that they're really the ones that have to use every day. From the mindset side, we provide a UX architect. So someone like myself, typically this person has had experience in developing and delivering SAP applications. They have a strong background in SAP's user experience technologies like Fiori, personas, some of the more mobile, iOS, Android, those kind of things. And they will be one of the people that will facilitate these remote or in-person sessions. And then we also bring a UX designer in. So someone that really knows how to create the best user experience, someone that is proficient with the prototyping tools, and someone that can help us stand up that prototype, make sure we have a great user experience, continue to collect feedback from users, and as well as a co-facilitator for our design sessions. Then from the client side, in addition to end users, we also like to at least include a developer or two, someone that knows how current tools are built, that knows how their current systems work, and maybe some process experts, some subject matter experts, a BA that lives in that process, can help answer some of those questions and just provide additional context throughout the workshop, whether it be remote or in person. We typically aim for 10 to 12 client participants, and I think that this number is even more important for remote sessions where it can be a little trickier facilitating those discussions, making sure we're not talking over one another, and having the right size group really helps people have enough time to give their opinions without feeling like we have to exclude some. So one of the other logistics points that we can think about for our remote sessions is the importance of video in creating an engaging experience. So obviously, when we are in person and we're all in the same room, we can see each other face to face. It's very easy to have that human connection and ability to communicate. Where in remote, that can be a little more difficult. So when available, we recommend using video conferencing tools. This is certainly something you have to check with the attendees ahead of time. One, people probably want to be prepared to be on video. So sometimes remote workers might still be in their PJs. Maybe their hair's not as brushed as they'd like it to be. So setting that expectation ahead of time helps people maybe get more comfortable with that. We also have seen there sometimes be technical limitations. Some companies today are dealing with a sudden surge of remote workers. A lot of people using up network and bandwidth that wasn't being used before. So, we've talked to some clients that have had challenges with video conferencing as of late. So definitely need to iron out any technical details, but we certainly recommend this option when available. For facilitators on our side, it gives us visual keys that participants may be confused or not as engaged. In remote sessions, there are more distractions. Slack and email and tabs of information are always just another tab away. So, having that visual key helps us as facilitators keep people on track. And even just taking a look at some of the stats around video conferencing, it seems, at least according to a Forbes Insight survey, at least half of people agree with the fact that it helps their degree of understanding. So, we see video important as creating human connection. It makes it easier for facilitators to jump in and help where needed. And it's even been shown to help people retain some of the information that they receive and participate in through these sessions. So where available, we certainly recommend using video. So another thing about remote sessions is timing is especially key. In our sessions in person, we typically run them all day. So probably have a 3-hour chunk of time in the morning, an hour-long lunch break, and then another 3-hour chunk of time in the afternoon to go through these exercises. And in person, even then, you have to really manage the time to keep people engaged, schedule breaks the right way. But we've seen that even elevate to another level of importance for remote sessions. So it's manageable for people to be in a workshop setting in person all day interacting with their fellow teammates. In remote sessions, we try and keep those to a 3-hour maximum to really see engagement fall off quicker. We don't want to have people have to sit at their computer in front of their laptops on a call 8 hours a day, especially when there's not the option of video. That becomes even less engaging. So for our workshops, participants will never be engaged for any longer than 3 hours at any one time. And within those 3 hours, there'll still be several short breaks, giving attendees time to stretch, refill their snacks, take care of any emails or pings that might have popped up, and really just give them a little bit of time to reset before jumping into the next activity. We try and follow what's called the 50-10 rule. So I don't know if anyone uses this, to keep track of their own productivity, but essentially it's the idea that, people sometimes work best when, you take a 50 minutes of focus and then you take 10 minutes to stretch, refresh, reset before jumping into the next activity. So even throughout those 3-hour sessions, we still want to make sure that we schedule appropriate breaks to give people enough time to get ready for the next activity and just kind of take a bit of a mental breather before moving forward. And participants. So we talked about this a little bit before, where we have that kind of recommendation of 10 to 12 client participants. Not necessarily a hard stop on those, but something that we've seen, the more and more participants you get, the harder it becomes to facilitate those discussions, the more voices in the room, and kind of the longer everything takes. So the goal is to have 10 to 12 total participants. We tend to split those into breakout sessions between 3 and 6 participants, depending on the number we have in the session overall. We run up to 2 sessions per day. So we would run one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And that's where we get that kind of total 10 to 12 participant number. So really the reason why we do this, again, only one person can effectively be speaking at one time. And we want our participants to have enough time to give their opinions, to provide their voice and to lend their ideas to the project. So keeping that number smallish at least helps us do that effectively. This is something that even in our in-person sessions, we do create breakout groups for activities. It's just remote, we have to facilitate that a little bit differently. So now we've covered some of the key, kind of logistics items for our remote workshops. I want to go over what a kind of week-long agenda might look like for these remote design sessions. So day one, so we want to cover an intro. The session will involve all participants and serve as an introduction to the remote design process. We want to introduce the team members, get to know each other a little bit, understand each other's backgrounds. We want to cover the agenda, so lay out the week ahead, make sure everyone's comfortable and knows at least a little bit about what activities we're going to do, the purpose of why we're there, and then the tools. So we're going to get more into the tools in the next section, but the tools for remote design thinking sessions are one of the bigger differences between remote and in-person sessions. In person, we typically have very standard pen, paper, Post-its, whiteboard markers, that kind of thing. There's no learning curve. Whereas in remote sessions, to facilitate, engaging experiences, we've added another few tools to our tool belt. And those are things that a lot of our participants may not have come across before, and something that we need to take a little bit of time to introduce them to. So that day one gives us the ability to kind of level set on who's participating in this workshop, what is the agenda that we're going to follow over the next couple days, what are the tools that we're going to be using, and then to wrap up, we like to have some of the project sponsors or some of the users talk about the goals that they have for the project, make sure we know what process we're talking about, and really just level set that day one so that we're all in a good space to really kick off the actual workshop activities in the next several days. This is something that will probably last anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. And again, is kind of for all participants to join in together and get on that same page. Workshop agenda day 2. So this is where we're going to really hone in on that inspiration phase and the definition of the people that we're designing for and the processes that we're taking a look at. So for this day, we're going to start with a half-hour recap for all participants. So this will be first thing in the morning, start a quick meeting to get an intro and a recap of anything from day one. Then, as we discussed in terms of splitting our breakout sessions, we're going to split into potentially those 2 teams of 5 or 6 people. The session will last 3 hours, and there will be a morning and an afternoon session. So the first activity will be creating a process map using Mural, which we'll get into a little more later. But essentially, how do we identify the people involved in this process and the steps that they take to reach whatever endpoint it is that they're looking for as an outcome? Then we want to create personas based on our template that we've created through Mural. So again, we'll discuss Mural in a little bit and talk about templates, but we've created a way for participants to easily go in and create these personas. We showed an example of that before. So really helping to define what the working environment is, what the goals of our users are, and in particular, what challenges they have that may be holding them back. So again, these activities are really meant to define the people and the processes that we're looking at before jumping in and start trying to find solutions. So it gives us a good day to talk through all of those items and give us kind of fuel for our ideation session the next day. Speaking of which, we come to day 3, our ideation day. So again, morning session, we want to start the day with a half-hour recap for all participants. Then we're going to split into our breakout groups again. Another 3-hour working session. So we'll have one group with that session in the morning, and we'll run the same session with the second group in the afternoon. Again, splitting it out by groups gives, kind of smaller working groups, gives more people the ability, the chance to talk, a little bit more time to provide their opinions, as opposed to running it all together in one session. So the first activity, we'll be able to generate new features and ideas with the Crazy 8's paper template that we provide. So again, Crazy 8 is something where we want people to take a look at those pain points, the challenges the user face, and come up with 8 small ideas or pieces of functionality that would help solve some of those pain points. Then the second activity will be to take those ideas that we've come up with, that we've shared amongst our group, and sketch those new solutions. So this is where, again, we want to reach back to those artifacts like the process map, understand the steps involved, understand those new features we've come up with, and start to put that together into a fully functional application or applications or process change that will deliver value for our end users and solve some of those pain points. So again, we look to use pen and paper for these processes. So similar as we would in person. Here the difference is, we'll have participants take a picture of that sketch. They can upload it, any number of different ways. They could Slack it to us, email. Mural provides easy upload for images. So in that way, once everyone's created their new solution, we can share that amongst the whole team by uploading those images. If you happen to have a team that all have digital sketching solutions, you've all got your iPad Pros available, then certainly that's an option as well. We haven't typically found that to be the case for any of our sessions. And day 4, so this is the final day of the workshop itself. So anyone on the client side, they will get a break in the morning where the Mindset UX designer and any facilitators for the sessions or developers that we've brought along will come together to co-create an initial wireframe of the solution. And then we'll bring the workshop participants back in the afternoon to review that wireframe. So this will be based on, all of the great ideas that participants have contributed over the past several days, layered in with our experience in creating usable, easy, simple applications. So we'll review this initial wireframe in Sketch or InVision. We'll get some early feedback. We'll make some tweaks, and we'll close out that session, hopefully in a place where everyone is pretty comfortable in the direction that we're headed. They've had the time to give the ideas for their new solutions and maybe provide a little feedback. And that'll give us enough information that we need to go ahead and start creating that final solution. So typically about a week after that day 4 session, we would schedule a walkthrough and feedback session to get user comments on the prototype. So we'll share that through InVision. We'll send everyone a web link. They can access it. They can provide comments. They can even share it with their peers to broaden that feedback group. And we also might present that initial user story backlog to product owners and potential development teams so that we start to get an idea of, if we really want to build this product right here, what effort is that going to take and how does that line up with any time or budget constraints that we may have? So as we demonstrate in that first kind of picture of the design thinking process, this remote session allows us to really engage our end users, to understand from them what their challenges are, to define them, define the people and the processes that we're taking into account. It allows us to come up with new solutions through different activities like the Crazy 8s and the low-res prototyping. And then we're able to continue to test and get feedback on that through the high-resolution prototype. We're able to get that user story backlog in place to a point where we're now ready to start a development activity to deliver on all of these things that we've engaged our users for. So 4 days of workshops in person, no sessions lasting longer than 3 hours for any given user group. We use breakout sessions to really facilitate engaging activities. And then a week later, we come back with that final review, or at least initial final review. Certainly we're still open to taking feedback items and refining that solution until we're in a place where all parties are comfortable to move forward. So last but not least, we want to go through some of the tools that we would use in these remote workshops and how they are really important in continuing to facilitate engaging experiences when we don't have that, in-person whiteboard posted environment to work with. So a few of the tools that we're going to talk about today. For video conferencing, we have Zoom. For our digital whiteboard solution, we have a tool called Mural. And for high fidelity prototyping and interactivity, we have InVision. So first, Zoom conferencing. So we've used a couple different conferencing tools in the past, and certainly as we engage with all sorts of different clients, I'd say I pretty much have experience using all of them: GoToMeeting, Skype, Teams, Zoom, WebEx, all those different ones. And personally, we've settled on Zoom as our tool of choice at Mindset. I think it's a really easy to use feature-rich tool. It offers plenty of availability for sharing content, audio, video conferencing with optional backgrounds. I don't know if anyone's been downloading fun new Zoom backgrounds lately, but it's been something fun our teams have been doing. And it gives you the ability to create breakout rooms if you want to split your sessions up. We run morning and afternoon sessions instead of splitting it out into breakout rooms. That just requires a few more facilitators to go out into the rooms and make sure that everyone's on task. But if that's how you prefer to run your sessions, certainly an option and could be really valuable. There's also other things like chat, the question and answer feature, and the concept of raising your hand virtually. So sometimes when other people are talking and people have an idea come up, it's easier for them to chat or raise their hand. So other nonverbal or non-video cues that signal you either may need help, you have a question, you have a comment you want to get in. So just in general, we found Zoom to be feature rich. It is pretty much everything we need. And in general, we found it quite easy to use. So one of the biggest tools I think we're going to cover today that is a big part of running remote design sessions is having something like Mural. Another big one out there is called Miro. But these are digital whiteboard spaces that allow us to at least somewhat replicate that experience of posting sticky notes and kind of brainstorming and collaborating in real time. So it's something like if you ever use Google Docs and you can see where people's cursors are and what they're looking at and what they're adding in real time. Mural offers that same functionality of seeing who's adding what sticky notes and typing in where. That gives us that real-time collaboration. Users can add sticky notes, images, links. You can sketch in it. Again, if you're just kind of using a mouse and a trackpad, a little challenging, but they do have apps for iOS and Windows 10 that can make that a whole lot easier. One of the biggest features they have, and that we think is super important, is the ability to leverage and create templates. So Mural has a ton of templates they've already created for various things like personas, sprint retrospectives, story mapping, idea prioritization and voting. I mean, they've got the lean UX canvas in there. They've pretty much got almost everything that you could think of available as templates. And then at Mindset, based on some of the ones that we've used in in-person sessions, we've gone ahead and created our own Mural templates as well. This allows us to give people directions and really put new users at ease. And then they have features like timers and voting that can help keep the workshop on track or help prioritize items or make decisions. So really just a feature-rich tool that allows us to build out workshop agendas and templates and have that kind of real-time collaboration with our users. So as you'll see from kind of go through some screenshots of the tool, this is one, again, as an overview. We won't have time to dive into live demos or really explore the tool in a ton of detail, but again, we'll have our contact information and some Q&A afterwards for folks that want more. But here we have an example of the templates. So you can see under Mural templates, we've got retrospectives, we've got hero journeys, we've got a design thinking canvas. And if you see that scroll bar on the right side of the screen, you see there's plenty of room to scroll through all of the templates that they have available. So just signing up for Mural, you already have a lot of out-of-the-box features that you can take advantage of. And then you'll see under Mindset UX templates, this is just an example of one that we've created, but for our personas exercise, we already have, kind of a template up there with instructions and outlines for users. So just something to help reinforce the concept and make it easier for new participants to jump in, kind of understand what's going on and start creating these things that they may not have ever worked with before. So templating, again, it's a really powerful feature that works quite well for tools like Mural and Miro. Just taking a quick look at the canvas and the options that are available. So if you're in a given template or session, you can see on the right that there is an outline. So something that describes the different sections of that template. We can add directions in there. So certainly as facilitators, we'll provide those introductions, but just something the users can continue to refer to as they work on those activities, to help them understand what it is that they're doing. On the left-hand side, this is where we'll add in all of our content to the boards. So that top pane right there, the square with the fold, that's our sticky notes. We can also add shapes and connectors, really helpful for our process maps or any diagramming that we may be doing. You can add images. You can add custom layouts. So if you need a quick grid thrown up there or some swim lanes, they have those templates already available to just drag onto the canvas. Images, file uploads, and sketching. So really, again, like a digital whiteboard you would expect to work. We can add stickies, we can add sketches, we can add text, and then because it is digital, we can also add videos and links and images and all sorts of other cool artifacts that might come up throughout the course of our workshop. Other great features that we talked about, you can see that kind of pink stopwatch saying 14 minutes and 46 seconds left. That's a timer feature that they have. So we use what's called a time timer in our in-person workshops to help keep everyone on track. But Mural has thankfully built in a digital version of that type of tool. So it'll get more white and less pink as time goes on, showing users how much time has elapsed. And again, especially for remote sessions, we want to make sure that we're keeping people on track. We're able to get the workshop activities completed in the time we set aside and then let the users go on and get about the rest of their day. And little features like these timers really help us keep people engaged. If you're like me, it's always easier to work against a deadline as opposed to kind of an infinite timeline where procrastinators like me have a chance to save everything up for the last second. So those timers are really helpful for anyone facilitating these sessions. So just the last couple tips and tricks for the session for using Mural. Don't start with a blank canvas. It's intimidating. So if you just bring someone into a totally blank space and say, we're going to create personas and some process maps today, or we're going to have you sketch out new ideas, especially for people that haven't done this before, blank is intimidating. So take advantage of those templates, structure something out for users, make them comfortable using the tool, and give them really the ability to not have to think about what these new things are, and just the ability to kind of jump in and start participating. Definitely want to give an overview of the tool and maybe some intro exercises that, let's introduce the team, but let's also introduce the tool Mural at the same time. So like we said, on that first day, we want to level set everyone on the tools that we'll be using and making sure that people have some time to get comfortable with those. If you save that up for the first activity, you're going to lose a lot of time. There's going to be a lot of questions. It's going to kind of feel, a little frictiony. But if you give a chance to give an overview ahead of time, that'll really help people get into that comfortable space and be able to focus on the workshop activities themselves. And certainly make sure you know how to use the tool before teaching other people. Fortunately for tools like Mural, there's a lot of content out there. They have playlists on YouTube, so short videos that kind of go over the canvas, show you how to facilitate sessions, give a lot of great tips and tricks. Kind of like they say, activate your facilitator superpowers. They have videos on Teachable. You'll also see plenty of people on LinkedIn talking about it. So a lot of great resources for you and potential workshop participants to understand this tool before jumping into the session. Which, like we said, it's a good idea. That way they can focus not on learning new tools and instead focus on the session at hand. And finally, I want to take a quick peek at the InVision tool. So this is what we use to create the interactivity in our prototypes, allow users to click through the screens. Then as you'll see in that screenshot, people can come in and add comments anywhere on those screens, leave suggestions, questions, feedback. And this is just another way for us to continue to refine what we've created, especially helpful in remote sessions where people can kind of walk through this at their own pace, add questions and comments where available. People get notifications, and it's just another tool to facilitate good conversations around what's working, what might still be confusing, and really shape up this prototype in a way that, again, all participants and all stakeholders would feel comfortable beginning that development. They really feel like this will help solve their challenges and that they've been able to co-create that new solution. And, again, we really just want to make sure that before we get into developing and deploying code, where rework is very expensive, that we take the time to refine our solutions with users to really test it out with them against their processes and have that good understanding before going to the development phase. So lastly, before we get into some Q&A, we just want to offer some final takeaways. So remote sessions can be equally as fun, engaging, and productive as your in-person sessions, but it's probably going to take a little bit more planning around the logistics involved. Are you using video conferencing? What's your digital whiteboard tool of choice? Are your templates set? Those types of items. So there's absolutely ways to deliver great sessions remotely and to get a lot of value out of it, but it does take maybe a little more planning and thinking through than in-person sessions. To that point, you'll probably use some different tools than you would for your in-person sessions. So really figure out what's going to work for you, learn those tools, help your users understand them, and use those to facilitate your great session. So for digital whiteboards, you have Mural and Miro, among others. For prototyping, we use Sketch and InVision, but you can always use things like Adobe XD or Axure or Figma. All of those are great options. So figure out what works best for you, what's going to work best for your participants, learn those tools and make them readily available for your sessions. Absolutely take advantage of templates to help guide your participants through any workshop activities. So this is something that Mural and Miro both do very well. You can take advantage of their pre-made templates, or you can arrange your own kind of boards and then save them off as custom templates. But make sure you're doing something that engages your users, that doesn't start them from a blank canvas, and that really guides new participants through these workshop activities. And finally, practice makes perfect. It's hard to get any of these things exactly right the first time. You'll probably always hit a technical snag or two. Something's going to come up. But the best way to really get better at this is to start participating, start engaging, reach out to folks that might be able to help you facilitate those sessions, and really just get started. So with that, I'll leave up my contact information. So like I said, if anyone has questions or wants to dive deeper into any of the things that we covered today, certainly always available either by email, or you can find me, Daniel Flesher on LinkedIn, even though I usually go by Dan. And with that, we can take some questions that anyone might have had through the session.
Yep. We do have a couple of questions, Dan. The first one, let's see, how would you recommend making new participants feel comfortable?
Yeah, so I think, first and foremost, especially given that remote sessions typically involve new tools, so maybe people haven't worked with Mural before. So definitely giving an introduction early on to make people comfortable with that, so that the tools kind of fade into the background and really the meat of the work is what people are able to concentrate on. And then I think, I've hit this point a couple times, but create templates. It's a great way for users to have easy visual introductions to the exercise. You can layer in outlines and introductions and instructions. So that'll really help, again, have users less focused on understanding, exactly what this persona thing is, and really give them a guided way to complete activities like that in a way they can understand.
Great. Very helpful. Next question. How do you keep people engaged throughout the session?
Yeah, so one way I would recommend doing that is saving ample time for breaks. So people are only going to be able to sit down and provide focused attention for so much time in any one period. So like we kind of talked about earlier, that 50-10 rule is helpful for setting focus time for activities and then giving people a chance to step back for a minute and take a quick break. And another feature that we just talked about in Mural, the ability to set timers. We've always found that helps with time management. It gives people a deadline to work to, and it gives people kind of a target for their next session break. So utilizing those timers can be really helpful in keeping people engaged and on track before they move on to some of their structured breaks.
Great. I have one more question, and I see some coming up on the chat box too, but I'll give you the one that I have. What is the biggest difference between remote and in-person sessions?
I think one of the biggest differences that I've seen in remote and in-person sessions is the tools that it takes to facilitate those. So for in-person sessions, everyone's in the same room, we're all face-to-face, easy to communicate. The types of things we use throughout the activities, Post-it notes, pen, paper, whiteboards, all things that people are very familiar with, and there's no real learning curve to show someone how to use a Post-it note. Where for our remote sessions, using audio and video conferencing tools, using digital whiteboards like Mural and Miro, those are likely to be new for a lot of our participants. So, making sure that we have the time to plan out how we're going to use those tools effectively, how we're going to get our users comfortable with them, and how we're going to make sure that the focus is not learning how to use those tools and the focus is the workshop activities. And those, I think, are the biggest differences that I've seen with the remote sessions versus the ones that we host in person.
Great. Next question, great session. Next question is, would you recommend reviewing the comments with the whole group from prototypes and how it may or may not match with the business requirements?
Yeah, so we typically will engage the whole team in at least an initial walkthrough of the comments to, understand what everyone's thinking. Then typically people will have time on their own to add additional comments. We always get them and can review them. I think the person from the business side that helps, really keep that balance between what are the users requesting and what might we actually be able to deliver is the person that's going to play that role of the product owner. So they're typically someone from the client side. They're typically engaged in the business. They have a good understanding of the users. They might work with them on a day-to-day basis. And they'll be someone that can really help, that we'll look to make those decisions on, what is in, what is out, what might be feasible. And even, in the spirit of agile development, a lot of the things that we talk about are defining a minimum viable product. So what's the first version to get out the door that will work for our users? And then what are maybe subsequent versions that, we can deliver some of those features later, but that might not be able to be prioritized right now. And the person that plays that product owner role is usually that decision maker that can help us understand from a business perspective what is of the highest priority that we should deliver now and what might we negotiate to deliver in future versions.
Thank you. Next question. Do you have any good remote icebreakers?
Yeah. So let's see, some of the remote icebreakers that we've used before, and actually we use some of these in person. So one of the ones that I like to start some of the early days with is a icebreaker called Headlines from the Future. And it's essentially, if someone 6 months from now, a year from now, when this project has gone live and has been in place, and they were going to write an article in Forbes, the New York Times, your company newsletter, what would the headline of that article be that talks about the success of this project? And I think it's a good way for people to, in kind of a fun, non-intimidating way, to articulate what their goals are for this project. You know, typically you'll see differences from the IT team and the users and the business. They all have different ideas, but it's a good way to really get a sense of what everyone thinks of as success. And then I think another good one to use on ideation days, and this is where you can encourage people to bring in screenshots or videos or demos, but we like to have people share their favorite app or something they use in their day-to-day lives that makes things easier. You know, it could be an app, could be something physical tool or process, but this really helps us zone in on the things we use in our daily lives that maybe don't have anything to do with our work life or don't have anything to do with SAP. What are those features and functions and things that really make us excited or make things easy? And sharing that before ideation starts to break people out of the mind space of, you know, again, we work with a lot of SAP applications. So, you know, we want to get people away from always thinking about how that works and get people thinking about, in their day-to-day life, what are things that make things easier, and how might we build those types of things into the applications and the tools that we use at work. So I think both of those are, you know, good icebreaker intro things that get people talking, get people thinking, and that also have value to be used in the workshop as well.
I like that, Headlines from the Future. Next question: how do you know that the people involved in the design session are the right persons? As a company can ask specific employees for whom the application will be developed to participate, but those people may not be very involved in the process or just involved in part of it.
Sure. So we typically, you know, I think when we talked about the core participants, you know, we'll go over that a little bit. It's like we said, end users we feel are very important, not only for the user research phase, but if possible to get them involved in the design session as well. So if we're going to be creating a new app for HR teams to, you know, search employee data and things like that across the organization, we want people that are going to be living that process every day. Same with people, if we want to create a new CRM sales tool, we want to talk to the people and engage the folks that are working with, you know, as our clients on a day-to-day basis. They're going to be able to give us the best insights. And again, from like a change management perspective and a relationship building perspective, having them involved in co-creating their solutions provides a lot of value in them wanting to adopt those tools. And then certainly from the other participant section, right, we have developers and subject matter experts. So, you know, for any task or given process, you know, it's good if we can engage maybe the people that built the current tools or know how today's systems work, and then as well as any people that are there on the functional configuration business analyst side to provide good details on maybe how the process should look. And that helps us marry up any differences we see with how the process might be running to today. So while it's not necessarily an exact science of, you know, figuring out exactly who should be involved, I think if you focus on including at least a couple of the people that are going to use the tool, maybe some of the people that might build the tool, and maybe some process experts, you know, again, in that 10 to 12 participant range, you'll have a good enough cross-section to get that right amount of information. And then when you get to the prototype sharing, right, we can always include that in a bit of a wider group. So we can always expand that kind of feedback loop to include some of people that might not have been able to participate in the session itself, but still give them a chance to provide their input and opinions as they go through the process.
That's it for questions, Dan. Thank you so much. So as Dan mentioned, I think, Dan, that concluded the presentation for today?
That did, yeah. So mostly want to leave everyone with contact information here. So you can always reach me at this email, Daniel Flesher on LinkedIn. Happy to answer any additional questions that you might have, or dive into deeper answers than maybe if, you know, from some of the questions that were asked already.
Perfect. Thank you to everybody who joined us today, and also to the folks that asked such great questions. We will have a YouTube video of this session up on the Mindset YouTube channel a little bit later. And again, yes, if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. We have additional sessions on the Mindset page, on the Mindset event page as well. So if you'd like to join us at another webinar, please don't hesitate to sign up. Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.